to Music and Mind Live. Thank you for joining me today as we all wrestle with the historic events of the past few weeks. We evolve as humans, but change is slow. Let's hope the goodwill of many will create a more just society. Today's program addresses the spiritual ramifications of both the powerful protests and the pandemic that continues. We will also look at how we respond and why with a scientific look at the brain and new developments in Alzheimer's research. I'm so fortunate to have Dr. Deepak Chopra with us. He is a world-renowned pioneer in integrative medicine and personal transformation, described by Time magazine as one of the top 100 heroes and icons of the century. He founded the Chopra Foundation, a nonprofit entity for research on well-being and humanitarianism, and Chopra Global, a company at the intersection of science and spirituality. He's authored books translated into over 43 languages, including numerous New York Times bestsellers. His 90th book, Metahuman: Unleashing Your Infinite Potential, addresses how we can move beyond our present limitations to infinite possibilities. His guided meditations with Oprah have reached millions of people. And Dr. Rudolph Tanzi is professor of neurology at Harvard University, vice chair of neurology, director of the Genetics and Aging Research Unit, and co-director of the Center for Brain Health at Massachusetts General Hospital. Dr. Tanzi is one of the world's leading researchers in the genetics of Alzheimer's and other neurodegenerative diseases. He has published over 500 scientific papers, including the top 3 most cited papers in the field of Alzheimer's research. Dr. Tanzi also professionally plays keyboards and has performed with Joe Perry and Aerosmith and me. Before we begin, a reminder to please submit your questions in the comments section for those of you watching on Facebook. We'll answer some of them at the end of the interview, and please do tell us your name and where you're from. So, welcome, Deepak. I'd like to begin with a short excerpt from one of your many recordings, Looking for Love, featuring the words of the Persian poet Rumi, spoken by Rosa Parks, an American icon of resistance to racial segregation.
God is within. My heart is in harmony with my head. My spirit soars as a bird in search of new sky. The essence of my life releases the God I love everywhere.
So beautiful, and what we all wish for. What can you tell us about recent weeks, both our ability in a civilized society to disregard human life and the passionate uprising of citizens with Black Lives Matter?
I think what we're going through is both the death of an old way of living and hopefully the birth of a new way of living, the birth of a new worldview, and also therefore a new world. But what we're going through right now is a grieving process because we have lost what we took for granted. And what we took for granted is our own existence. So as a physician, I've seen people go through this process in less than 1 hour in an emergency room. A person comes in with a heart attack and I see them fear in their eyes and I know that they know that they're going to die. And the first reaction is they're extremely upset in the sense, why me? They feel victimized. Of course, right now, it's not just me, it's all of us. But then the second reaction is anger and hostility. And then the third reaction is frustration. The fourth stage is helplessness and resignation. And then within a few minutes, they're dead. This is my experience in the emergency room. Once in a while, the experience was different. They went through all the stages and suddenly they found acceptance. And as soon as they found acceptance, you saw peace in their eyes. And they died in peace. But that was a very few people. So I think we are now between resignation and acceptance. And once we get to acceptance, the next stage is meaning. What does it mean? And I can tell you what it means. It means please don't take your existence for granted. You know, in spiritual traditions all across the world, you never take existence for granted. Yeah, my grandfather died when I was 6 years of age of a heart attack suddenly. And I went through my existential crisis at 6 years of age. and that's why I went on to become a doctor, and all my life is, why do we exist, and why aren't we grateful for the very fact that we exist, and why don't we have reverence and humility about the fact that we exist? Now our existence is threatened, so suddenly there's existential fear all over the world, and there is still no acceptance. It's all about human existence, not about existence. Human existence is part of a bigger existence, and that bigger existence is all of life. And if we respect life, then the ecosystem repairs itself. A mutation, and Rudy is a much bigger expert on mutations, but from the little I know, mutations occur when the ecosystem of existence, in this case, the microbiome is our common ecosystem of existence, the genetic information, the human genetic information, and all genetic information on the planet is entangled and it's responsible for this existence. But when we focus only on our existence, then we have this happen.
So tell me about your thoughts about racism, and why is it taking us so long to change? Why is this so challenging for society?
Again, Rudy would be a better person to ask this, but what we are seeing is intergenerational trauma that has a history of 400 years of slavery, and the memory of that is somehow embodied in our genes. And that is, by the way, not only the African Americans, but all the descendants of all the victims of colonialism. Colonialism is romanticized, but it was rape, it was murder, it was pillage, it was destruction, it was slavery, it was servitude. And that is epigenetically informing our biologies, all our colored people. I consider myself a colored person too. My great-grandfather was murdered by the British when they came to India. They wanted his land and he said no, they killed him. Okay, so that's my history. I recognize that history. It's in our genes. And not only is it in our genes, if we believe that body and mind are one, the spirit of people was broken 500 years ago. And that broken spirit is now expressing itself not only in biological inflammation, but in mental distress, in depression, in alcoholism, in poverty, in all the things that we think predispose you to disease. And therefore, the solution is not, Black Lives Matter is a very good first step. But if it stops there, there's no resolution. We have to go beyond in repairing this epigenetic damage that can only come from within self-organizing groups of Black communities, colored communities, online communities, service communities, communities with shared vision, passion, emotional bonding, complementing strengths. There's a lot to be done practically beyond Black Lives Matter. Repair the epigenetic injury of people who have been enslaved mentally for 400 years.
And we all will contribute now. That's the beauty of these protests, because they are so diverse. So we're still gravitating towards these entrenched ways of thinking at the moment. We're stuck in a political division as well. Would you say the same thing about that this stems from a very long wound?
All divisions come from the hallucination of the separate mind, which doesn't exist. Our mind is part of the planetary mind. Our brain is part of the planetary brain. Today, that brain is called the internet. But I can send you an emoticon with a hug and a kiss, and I can give you a dopamine hit. Or else I can look at Trump's tweets and get my blood pressure raised and my immune system compromised. So there's no doubt now that our emoticons, our emotional entanglement is also a brain entanglement that can cause inflammation and can also cause healing. Both are possible. The choice is ours.
So what amazes me is that most of your work encourages us to go within ourselves. And yet we're really moved right now by these large forces. So with the pandemic and our societal bonds wearing thin, so why do you suggest that we should be going inwards?
Well, actually, there is no inwards and there is no outwards. There's only consciousness having an experience. that consciousness modulates itself as thoughts and feelings. We call that the mind. Consciousness modulates itself as perceptions. We call it the body and the physical world. But actually, there's no difference between what we call the physical world and the body and the mind. They're all modulations of awareness as experience. So these experiences are what are called qualia experiences, qualities of awareness: color, shape, form, sound, music, texture, perceptions, but also inner qualities. We call inner qualities thoughts, feelings, emotions. But if you want to summarize all experience, it's sensations, sense perceptions, images, feelings, and thoughts, period. The rest is a human story, mythical story, human story, scientific story. They're all stories. Fundamentally, all we experience is consciousness and its qualities, which are emotions, feelings, thoughts, perceptions.
We'll get to this more with the book, and I want to ask Rudy about this as well. So tell us the difference between spirituality and religion.
Spirituality, in one phrase, is self-awareness, period. And that's the highest intelligence. The highest intelligence is to be aware of the self, not the self-image, which is a modified form of the self, not the body, which is also a modified form of the self, not the physical world, which is also a perceptual modification of the self, but self before it modifies into experience in spiritual traditions called pure consciousness, which is infinite, which is borderless, which is formless, which is the basis of every experience we have, which is mental, perceptual, or that which we call physical. So going inward simply means being the silent observer of your perceptions, thoughts, feelings, emotions, and sensations. And when you are the silent observer without judging, then insight happens. In Sanskrit, it's called vipassana. You suddenly see that the world you see is actually the projection of your own self, that there's no world independent of your experience of it and your interpretation of your experience of it.
It's amazing. You know, I came across a 1993 interview with you and Oprah, and you said, every cell in your body is eavesdropping on your internal dialogue, which is very meaningful to me because to be a singer, the mind-body connection was an incredibly important and useful insight for me because most of singing is created by involuntary muscles. And so this answers my question, though. You have to be outside of yourself a little bit to begin to kind of get those forces working for you. So while reading MetaHuman, which is behind you, I love that. This is a beautiful book. I recommend it to everybody. Listening to your voice, both in guided meditations and musical recordings and in interviews, I have felt so uplifted. You've truly made meditation mainstream. And I can imagine that you've probably already surpassed your goal of reaching 100 billion or 1 billion people. Is that true?
We're close. No. We're hundreds of millions, but not a billion.
Well, everybody listening today is going to pass it on. So we'll grow it a little bit today. So tell us, what is MetaHuman?
Meta means beyond, and human in this case means beyond the human conditioned mind, because our minds are conditioned through history, through economics, through religion, through science, through mythology, through all the stories that we've heard. As soon as we are born, our minds start conditioning, and we lose sight of the fact that the original mind, before the conditioning, was a field of infinite possibilities, infinite creativity, infinite joy, infinite love, evolution, self-organizing, the source of insight, intuition, imagination, inspiration, free will, choice, vision, and moving to higher dimensions of experience. But we get so bamboozled by our human constructs that we lose our what spiritual traditions call our soul. So MetaHuman is just going back to your basic nature, which is infinite creativity and infinite joy and infinite love and infinite compassion and ultimately healing.
I love it. It's just reading it makes me feel much more open, more hopeful. So you've written 3 books with Dr. Rudy Tanzi, who's joining us now: Super Brain, Super Genes, and The Healing Self. And Rudy's not just a brilliant scientist, he's an incredible communicator. If you want to understand, and I'm talking to you audience, the state of Alzheimer's research, watch his 25-minute long video on the 2 called Stopping Alzheimer's Disease. We all Lake Nona Impact Forum a couple of years ago. And here's a snippet of my performance with Rudy, Chloe Flowers, and Chris Mann. And do check out Chris's creative at-home videos also on YouTube.
Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Maybe I've been here before. I've seen this room, I've walked this floor. I used to be alone before I knew you. I've seen your flag on the marble arch. Love is not a victory march. It's a cold and it's a broken hallelujah. 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 Hallelujah.
That's one of the handful of truly iconic songs. Beethoven said music is the mediator between the life of the senses and the life of the spirit. So what is music to you, Rudy, and how has it shaped you as a scientist?
I don't know if I would be a scientist without music. Music brings you creativity. It brings you a desire to serve others. I mean, that's what we do with music. We express ourselves, but we equally serve others with it. And I find that when I'm playing music and I'm being most creative, that success breeds success in the lab. So a lot of my scientific pursuits go best when I'm playing the music. And I've learned that if I'm not playing music for a while, that my science starts to go downhill. So it's a creative process. It's a process of service, and that's really where the best science comes from as well.
See, I've really thought too that science is incredibly creative because you're imagining what can be, and it requires that creativity actually to make things happen. And so I was surprised to see so many recordings from Deepak. And Rudy, can you speak to the effect that calming music has on the brain? And when combined with meditation, it really helps me, for instance, to hear some sort of musical background. What are alpha waves? This is the thing that we see on the internet all the time.
Right. Well, depending on what we're doing during the day, if we're paying attention to something, we're in alpha beta. This is the frequency of the waves in the brain. When we're meditating, the frequency slows down. So we may have a theta frequency or even a gamma frequency. I think Deepak can probably meditate down to gamma. Most of us meditate down to theta. And I mean, I should say delta. I misspoke, down to delta.
Delta.
Gamma is a very high frequency. Tibetan monks can reach the gamma frequency. But when you're listening to music, it does train your brain. And if you're meditating, it trains the brain. So whether you want to be stimulated and go up to that gamma for intuition and creativity, that's one type of meditation. And there's certain music that might do that. Throat music that Mickey Hart is so fond of with the Tibetan monks can stimulate that gamma frequency of excitement and intuition. If you need to relax, you go down, you might have music that brings you more down to theta, or a meditation of love and service, a metta meditation that brings you down to theta or delta. So you can either go up or you can go down, depending on what type of experience you want to have. And music and meditation both serve that purpose. And it's really, really good for your body. Deepak and I did a study we published some years ago, one of the first studies to really quantify the effects of meditation on the brain and body. And the results we got after 1 week of a meditation trial, I would not have gone that far in writing a science fiction book in terms of what we found. 40% increases in the main anti-aging enzyme telomerase. We looked at gene activity or gene expression profiles, hitting inflammation. The Alzheimer's gene expression went in the right direction. And this was just in 1 week. So meditation and calming is very, very powerful. And music can bring you there just as well.
Yeah, for me, that's the fourth movement of Strauss's Fear Lets the Leader of the four last songs. And even when I sing it, every time I go into the zone or a flow state and can really feel my breathing calm down, even though I'm singing these impossibly long phrases. So I do think that, at least for me, that's certainly a musical connection as well. And speaking of Mickey, there are explorations using 40 hertz vibratory therapies. And we're going to speak with Mickey Hart and Zakir Hussain in an upcoming episode and learn more about the power of vibration. Can you speak to this, why we as human beings respond to rhythm and vibration?
Well, we're finding in our lab as well that even higher frequencies than 40, 40 is a gamma frequency. You wouldn't normally be at 40 hertz, but music or meditation, if you're really good at it, will get you there. And at even higher gamma, above 40, we can do this with deep brain stimulation, or we can do it with a helmet that does what's called transcranial current stimulation. And if we can get neurons firing cyclically at gamma or high gamma, suddenly the other cells in the brain, the cleanup cells called the glia, microglia, start cleaning up the debris that causes Alzheimer's disease, and they start becoming less inflammatory. So you can actually, like a drug, and train the brain to certain frequencies that actually can help with Alzheimer's pathology or just with brain health in general. And it used to be that was kind of science fiction, but there have been several papers now that really confirm that.
That's amazing. So you both seek to address inflammation. This is a really powerful word that you both talk about, but your methods seem to be diametrically opposed, medicine and spirituality. So how are you friends? How have you written books together? Aren't you constantly in conflict?
No way, man. It's like we say that when you climb the mountain of science, you look into the valley of spirituality. It's all the same thing. In science, we ask questions like what, where, when, and how. But in spirituality, the first question is why and who. And you combine those two and you get the whole package. And that's what we try to achieve when we work together, write our books.
And you agree, Deepak?
Yes, I do. And actually, since Rudy and I have been working together, things have actually become much clearer in why we should not separate science and spirituality whatsoever. Rudy explained the difference. I will elaborate on that. Science is about what's happening, and spirituality is about who's asking and why. So, they complement each other. Now, I've been working together because Rudy's a scientist, and we've also been looking at the autonomic nervous system, which has, as you know, two branches, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. Right now, the world is on fire. It's inflamed. It's sympathetic overdrive. So inflamed mind, inflamed body, inflamed behavior, inflamed brain, inflamed environment, inflammation in the food with pesticides. They're all petroleum products, inflamed microbiome. So inflammation is the common factor, both chronic inflammation and acute inflammation. People who are getting sick with COVID-19, a lot of them have chronic inflammation, but now we have discovered, Rudy, I, and others with collaborators, that those who are getting sick are also getting acute inflammation, what are called acute inflammatory storms. So inflammation is the common factor. It also compromises the immune system. And it's all sympathetic overdrive. Now, the opposite of the sympathetic nervous system is something called the parasympathetic nervous system. And for your listeners right now, I would recommend that they go on the internet and they type out the following phrase: polyvagal theory, polyvagal theory. So the dominant nerve of the parasympathetic nervous system is the vagus nerve. Vagus is related to the English word vagabond, which means it goes everywhere. It influences your facial expressions along with the facial nerve, your eye movements. Are you looking happy? Are you looking sad? The tone of your voice, the volume of your breath movement, your heart rate variability. Ultimately, it pierces all the diaphragm and self-regulates every organ in the body. Why am I mentioning this? When you sing, when you chant, when you take deep breaths, when your heart opens up with body language like this, like a great opera singer, you're actually stimulating every branch of the vagus nerve and you're bringing about self-regulation, you're decreasing inflammation, and you're optimizing immune function. You don't want an overactive immune system. That is, in fact, a problem. You'll get autoimmune disease and all kinds of problems. You don't want an underactive immune system that compromises you to infections and possibly cancer. You want a fine-tuned human system and fine-tuned immune system, fine-tuned endocrine system, fine-tuned nervous system. And there's nothing that can do that better, honestly, than music, art, poetry, dance, chanting, singing, deep breathing, and nursery rhymes. That's the best
nursery
way.
rhymes. That's
Nursery
so great.
rhymes.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Okay.
I'm just so happy singing is on that list. That really makes my day. Rudy, so on to neuroinflammation. Please tell us about your current work. And I love the story of how you met Joshua Cohen and Justin Klee.
Yeah, so, when I first started in Alzheimer's research way back, I discovered the first Alzheimer's genes in these 80s and 90s, and those genes taught us how the amyloid plaque is made. That's the sticky debris that's outside of nerve cells, amyloid, and that sets the stage for the disease. And what we've learned the hard way after many, many failed trials is that if you stop the amyloid from forming, it's too late to help a patient who's already has the disease. We're hoping if you catch them really early, before the disease goes too far, maybe stopping the amyloid plaque can help. But about 12 years ago, I discovered a new Alzheimer's gene that controlled neuroinflammation in the brain. And what that is that these little cells in the brain, so think about COVID first. In the lung, when the virus strikes, there are these immune cells that fight it, called macrophages, right? These little scroungy things. And they try to kill the virus. But they cause inflammation by producing these chemicals called cytokines, protein chemicals called cytokines. And when the patient has a cytokine storm, too many cytokines, an overreactive immune system, like Deepak was saying, the lung function shuts down, and that's these unfortunate patients who have severe disease or die. Well, Alzheimer's is cytokine storm in the brain. It's very similar. You get plaques and tangles, nerve cells die, but in this case, the inflammation in the brain again involves these cytokines, it's cytokine storm. And now if it's too robust, too many neurons die. And in a nutshell, what we've learned is if you want to help a patient right now who's demented, who has Alzheimer's, you have to stop neuroinflammation. So we like to say the plaques are like the match, but the neuroinflammation is the forest fire. You have to blow that out. So about 6-7 years ago, and I think you wanted me to tell you a little bit about this new success we've had in new breakthrough. About 6 or 7 years ago, 2 kids came to see me, Justin Klee and Josh Cohen. They were undergraduates of Brown University. They were in the same fraternity I was in when I was in college, Sigma Chi. So I took the meeting, they were Sigma Chi's. And they had this idea that was very, very nascent, very naive. And they said, if you want to protect a nerve cell against neuroinflammation, you have to do 2 different things. You have to protect this organelle called mitochondria and this other organelle. And no one's done it both at the same time. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? You're right. I mean, it takes an undergraduate to figure that out. We only protect one or the other. He said, it's like having half of a bulletproof vest. If you protect one side, they can shoot here. The other side, you shoot there. So anyway, fast forward, we tried these 2 drugs together. And the results were so amazing in the lab that the kids started a company. I call them the kids. They're 27, 28 years old now, but they were 20 and 21 when I met them. They started a company called Amylyx, and the first trial was in ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, which is a severe disease. And again, in ALS, the motor neurons in the spine are mainly dying because of neuroinflammation, right? All these diseases, Parkinson, Alzheimer's, ALS, neuroinflammation kills the bulk of the neurons, even though there's different routes to get there. So anyway, they did a trial with these drugs, and the trial worked. And in just 7 years, these 2 kids with a company have a successful ALS trial. The paper should be coming out soon in New England Journal of Medicine, the top clinical journal. And they're talking to the FDA about possible approval of a drug that will help, people with one of the worst diseases. The other exciting news is the same drug is now being tried in Alzheimer's, the same combination. And we're hoping that if it works in ALS, it works in Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and even any disease where there's neuroinflammation. And by the way, depression, schizophrenia, autism, all these neuropsychiatric diseases involve at some point neuronal damage due to neuroinflammation. So if you can find a way to protect against it or stop it, you can come up with what is almost like a magic bullet. And that's what we're very excited about these days. And we'll stay tuned. We'll let you know how it goes with the FDA and with the hopefully getting this into people soon.
It's so exciting. We're all hoping. Thank you so much. And one more thing for you, Rudy. You say our lifespan has outpaced our health span. Can you tell us about SHIELD?
Well, yeah, I mean, our lifespan has really outpaced our brain health span, right? So, we all get older now thanks to modern medicine, but the problem is our brain doesn't keep up. And the reason is because of inflammation in the body and neuroinflammation in the brain. And we're understanding more and more about this process. We now have a dozen different genes that cause Alzheimer's, all that do it through neuroinflammation. So when Deepak and I wrote this book, the Healing Self. See, I have a book too, Deepak. I didn't have it behind me, but we wrote the Healing Self, which is I think it's coming up in paperback only now this month. Yeah. It's the hardcover. The whole book was about how can you live your life to try to reduce neuroinflammation. What can you do? And inflammation in the body. And we came up with a 7-day action plan in the second half of the book. And so we're trying to think about a way to summarize the steps. And Deepak talks about the 6 pillars. And this is very similar. This is a kind of an acronym for remembering the 6 pillars of health. And that is SHIELD. S stands for sleep, because it's during deep sleep, you clean the brain of debris like amyloid plaque. H, handling stress, meditation, trying to manage your stress levels, because stress causes neuronal cell death due to what's called cortisol, then that triggers inflammation. So stress is very, very bad. That's why we need you, Renée, to sing for us and to keep us calm, and Deepak to lead meditations. That's the H of handle stress. You two can handle that. I don't know if the music I play with Joe Perry, it might cause some stress sometimes. But I is interaction with others. So we're social beings. The more social you are, the healthier the brain. Loneliness is a risk factor for Alzheimer's. Not being alone, but if you don't like it, loneliness. And exercise induces the birth of new nerve cells in the brain, especially in the areas affected in Alzheimer's. And we now know brand new data show that when you're learning new things during the day, you actually make new nerve cells in a part of the brain for short-term memory called the hippocampus. And those new nerve cells at night when you sleep, during dreams, they fire and help and use dreams to help you consolidate the new memories of the day and associate them with what you already knew in your life. Learning new things, of course, making new synapses. So you have, trillions of synapses. And in Alzheimer's or with age, what causes problems is loss of synapses. So it's very simple. The more you make in terms of synapses by learning new things, the more you can lose before you lose it. So it's like money in the bank. You build up synapses. So that's why musicians are so lucky, because we can learn, I actually do my work on my computer, on my keyboard. I'm sitting here right now at my keyboard. And sometimes during Zoom sessions, I hit mute and play my keyboard. So I get to do science and music all day sitting here. And when you make new synapses, especially learning new music or a new language, you're protecting the brain immensely. So synaptic reserve. Finally, diet. And Deepak mentioned the vagus and the vagal nerve. Well, what connects the gut to the brain is that same nerve Deepak mentioned, the vagus. And that's how the gut microbiome, the bacteria live in your gut, if they're healthy, control inflammation in the brain. So a healthy diet, Mediterranean diet, I'm a vegetarian, but seeds, nuts, fruits, no meat, just less processed junk food will help that gut bacteria to be healthy. And then that in turn helps the brain. So that's SHIELD, and all that's summarized in terms of action plans in the book that Deepak and I wrote.
Well, I want to add 2 things to that. One is that I'm so happy that when you said that you can take naps, because if you don't sleep a lot at night, then naps are okay. So I always thank you for that permission. I also would suggest that anybody who has had any musical training, or even if you haven't, one of the things you could do to learn, which is kind of 3-pronged, is to take up a musical instrument, guitar even, or anything that kind of gets that that eye coordination to the ear to something motor is very useful. And then another thing that I read that Deepak, that you have said, because you gave us already a terrific prescription list, was gratitude, how important gratitude is, and remembering peak experiences, some of the joyful events, right?
Yes, so we have a study on that too with Rudy. When people keep a gratitude journal at night, and this study was done with patients with chronic heart failure who were taking digoxin, and just keeping a gratitude journal, what am I grateful for, and writing down whatever came up in your mind, lowered inflammation, decreased inflammatory markers. That's just the first step. Gratitude and hostility don't go together. So gratitude, hostility creates inflammation, gratitude does the opposite.
So we have questions now from Charlotte in Sweden. If I have been driven by perfectionism in my career due to a conditioning from childhood that love and appreciation is given only if I achieve at the very peak of my ability, I also only feel self-love in these circumstances. Can the incentive instead be to perform well out of compassion for the art form, or is fear and competition greater inducements for success?
It depends on how you define success. So in my view, success is the progressive realization of worthy goals. It's the ability to love and have compassion. But most importantly, it's the ability to be in touch with your innermost being. The question comes from confusion between what is self and what is self-image. So self-love is what you see in a child automatically: joy, happiness, laughter, wonder, curiosity. And self-image is what you see in adults, which is they're constantly trying to protect their self-image. Is only as good as your last performance or your last hit. And that is actually what ultimately prevents you from being successful. The key again is meditation, because meditation allows you to go beyond your self-image, beyond your secret passages in the dark alleys and the ghost-filled attics of your mind, into your soul. You know, Shakespeare said, the man who hath no music in himself is fit for treasons, stratagems, and spoils. Let no such man be trusted. Before you vote, just ask, does this person listen to music? Does this person have humor? Does this person have his laughter? Does this person has true self-esteem rather than fear of self-image? And you'll know who to vote for.
So Layla, oh, go ahead. Sorry, Rudy, go ahead.
Chime in. I would also offer the advice that when you're performing, if you're trying to reach perfection, save reaching perfection for practice. And practice is everything. But then when you're performing, rather than seeking perfection, if your intention is to serve others, to make sure that what you're doing is acting in love and service to others, you take yourself out of yourself. And you're no longer putting that pressure on yourself. The negative thoughts, the worry will go away, because you're there saying, hey, I appreciate, I'm here serving you. Save the perfection for yourself for practice. But once you're out there, you're there to serve others with what you're doing. And it really helps you alleviate anxiety, I think, a lot, by taking yourself out of yourself and taking that pressure off yourself.
You know, that's how I got over stage fright. I've had a couple of bouts of horrible stage fright. And so once I was able to kind of view performance as a flowing through me to the audience, as a giving, as opposed to a being judged, it completely changed my point of view. So Layla, in fact, apropos, asked, what are meditation's impacts on vocal performance?
I don't know. I don't know the answer, but I can tell you that if you're deeply rested, have a good night's sleep, and you have deep rest from meditation, your performance is obviously going to be better. And also if you're not overridden by performance anxiety, and meditation definitely helps with performance anxiety. You're more in the process than in the outcome.
And I would find a great thing you can do if you're sitting in the audience ready to perform, or you're in the green room, is a meditation on gratitude and service. So first part of the meditation is how grateful you are that other people are spending their time. They could be doing anything, but they're there to hear you. That's a gift. So you're grateful for that gift, that they're there to hear you. And secondly, again, like I said before, reminding yourself that you're there for everyone in that audience, expressing love for them and serving them. And I think the more gratitude, love, and service that you meditate on, when you get out there, you just feel great, you know, and you take the pressure off yourself. So I would imagine that would make a better vocal, but I can only, I don't sing. You don't want me to sing. So.
Well, you don't want tension. You don't want any laryngeal tension, that's for sure. So
Yeah.
more focused on the process rather than the outcome is really a great advice. So Susanna asks, is there a certain genre of music that could help you reach theta transcendence, or does this just depend on the individual?
I can tell you what I know, and Rudy might be much more an expert on this, but many years ago, I discovered that if you give somebody Narcan, which is a narcotic antagonist, you know, we use Narcan for people who have overdosed on opiates. But if you give them Narcan and they were enjoying a particular kind of music, and you give them Narcan, then they lose their joy of the music, which means music produces endorphins and other opiates in the brain, and that's how you feel the joy. But these opiates are also immunomodulators. They modulate the activity of the immune system. So when I read about this many, many years ago, I also found out that Gregorian chants and then classical music like Vivaldi or Beethoven's Fifth, they all created not a COVID cytokine storm, but an opioid storm in the body. So we need to actually relook at all that research, because as you know, the opioid epidemic is killing so many people. One of the ways to tackle it is a combination of meditation, chanting, Gregorian chants or other chants, singing and listening to music, and deep breathing may be a very good way to counteract the effects of the sympathetic overdrive that causes inflammation.
There's also music you can find online that, you know, theta is a calming type of thing, not a gamma's up, theta's down. So there's music you can find online that's very soothing, more like ambient music. And actually, I don't want to promote my website, but I have a website, numberonemusic.com/Rudy Tanzi, where I have a lot of ambient pieces. And you can actually put a binaural beat behind the music. So a binaural beat is where you use two tones just off from each other, and they vibrate at a certain frequency, and it's subliminal. So there's music where you have a binaural beat that's at theta behind some ambient music, and subliminally it's getting you down to theta. In fact, Deepak and I have a device that we're still figuring out what to do with next, that uses light. So we have music that I have written and performed, it's ambient with the binaural beat. And as that frequency is going, there's light flashing that gives a light show that gets you down to theta with the music. So it's like a meditation experience. We called it the Dreamweaver device, and we're hoping to revamp it. But that's also a very effective way, as the combination of light and sound, to entrain the brain to either a theta or delta frequency of relaxation, or up to a gamma frequency of intuition and creativity.
Oh, I'm going to go. Would you repeat the site, please?
Well, I'll
Site
send,
address?
we'll send you a
Send it.
device. I'll send you.
Okay. Oh my gosh. Oh, I feel a high note coming on. Well, we're out of time now. I can't thank you enough. Doctors Deepak Chopra and Rudy Tanzi, I am so grateful to you for joining me. Thank you so much. Thank you for all of you for joining us. And I'll be with you every Tuesday at 5 p.m. via my Facebook page, Renée Fleming Music, or the Kennedy Center YouTube channel. Episodes will be available to view later, though, if you missed the live webinar. To stay in the loop, please sign up for the newsletter at my Facebook page or my website, reneefleming.com. And be sure to join me next Tuesday when my guest will be Dr. Wendy McGee, Professor of Music Therapy at Temple University, and Tom Schweitzer, co-founder of A Place to Be Music Therapy. We'll talk about Wendy's research and clinical work using music to help patients with traumatic brain injury, stroke, and neurological illness. And I'll ask Tom about his performance-based approach, creating original music to grapple with physical and mental health issues. We'll also look at the special techniques therapists are using during COVID-19 to deal with social isolation and anxiety. Their passion will inspire you. See you then.